Hello everyone, it's Lee again with 9 hominin reconstructions showcased in Blender. Almost all of their crania are from MorphoSource collections managed by either Professor Douglas Boyer or Professor Lee Berger. And I downloaded these assets with permissions and then reoriented, resized, and symmetrized them in Blender, where I also sculpted and integrated any missing bony elements. I rendered all of their subdermal soft tissues from scratch, and all of their skins are heavily modified copies of a modern human mesh by Sketchfab user Mono. Since most of their textures are still unfinished, those are turned off for this showcase, where the focus will be their forms instead. And now we encounter them one by one, in order of completion. The first is fossil MH1, dated to 1.98 million years old, found at the Malapa Caves in South Africa's Gauteng district, and assigned to the taxon Australopithecus sativa. This mesh came from Professor Lee Berger's collection, and I had to digitally carve away the stone matrix also included in the scan, nudge the face into symmetry, and render the missing teeth and jawbone from scratch. I began rendering the soft tissue elements in 2022 with SculptFab and SculptGL, finished them in Blender in 2024, and was able to adjust those elements fairly quickly to fit all of the other species I modeled subsequently. Second, fossil skull Kabwe 1, dated to 300,000 years old, found at the Kabwe mine in Zambia's central province, and usually assigned to the taxon Homo heidelbergensis, which I'll qualify with the 9th model. This mesh was part of Professor Douglas Boyer's collection, and required no modifications except to repurpose the teeth and jawbone I created for the MH1 render. When I was first considering the use of that model's soft tissue meshes for the various other species, this was the first skull which I adapted those elements to in about May of 2024, and that test case was a success. Third, fossil skull OH5, dated to 1.75 million years old, found at Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania's Arusha region, and assigned to the taxon Paranthropus boisei. This came from Professor Douglas Boyer's collection, and I didn't have to make many adjustments, except to mirror over the left-hand zygomatic arch to fill in the missing right-hand one, and continue the mandible hand-me-down tradition. This was the first model with a finished texture in this series, which you may have seen in previous posts of mine, and it's a loose remake of a digital sculpture I made in 2019. This lineup's fourth fossil is the combined cranium and mandible LES-1, dated between 236,000 and 335,000 years old, found in the Rising Star Cave system in South Africa's Gauteng district, and assigned to the taxon Homo naledi. This asset was in Professor Lee Berger's collection, and I didn't add any material to symmetrize this one, since I wasn't too worried about the missing elements, but I did nudge the mesh a little to even it out. When I posted about this reconstruction series a year ago, this was the last of the models I'd made enough progress on to include there, so all of my reconstructions after this are going to be completely new to you all. And so, fifth in line and the first of the never-before-seen is Sangaron 17, dated to 700,000 years old. Found at the Sangaron site in Indonesia's central Java province, and assigned to the taxon Homo erectus. This mesh came from Professor Douglas Bohr's collection and required only a little bit of nudging to symmetrize it, but I did sculpt new material for many of the teeth and for the gaps in the cranium, and repurposed my mandible mesh again. The facial features I gave this one are slightly similar to my reconstructions of Homo ergaster from several years ago, but with some differences to distinguish it. Sixth up, fossil skull KNMER 1813, dated to 1.9 million years old. Found in Kenya's Kubifora region near Lake Turkana, and assigned to the taxon Homo habilis. This mesh was part of Professor Douglas Boyer's collection, and was pretty severely asymmetrical, with many elements missing from both sides of the skull. But with some effort, I was able to make it whole again. I haven't done many reconstructions of this species before, compared to my abundance of Neanderthal and Homo ergaster portraits, but hopefully this looks distinct and plausible enough. Number 7 in this series is fossil skull Amud 1, dated to 41,000 years old. Found at the Amud cave near the village Yakuk in northern Palestine, and assigned to the taxon Homo neanderthalensis. This mesh was part of Professor Douglas Boyer's collection, and required only gentle reshaping into symmetry, and repurposing the hand-me-down mandible mesh. This and Sangaron 17 are the only two models in this lineup based on fossils found outside of Africa. And since Neanderthals did range far north, my most hoped-for future fossil find has always been the permafrost mummified remains of one. This eighth cranium and mandible set belongs to fossil KNMWT 15,000, dated to 1.6 million years old. Discovered at Nariokotame in Kenya's Turkana County, and assigned to the taxon Homo ergaster. This skull mesh came from Artec 3D rather than MorphoSource, and once it was downloaded, I isolated the mandible and realigned it, filled in the incomplete brow ridge with that portion of the Kabwe cranium, and made other minor adjustments. Since these are the remains of an adolescent, my challenge was to make this face's features distinct from that of our own species, while also softening and smoothing them so he looks his age. Our ninth and final entry is the Bodo cranium, dated to 600,000 years old. Discovered at Bodod in Ethiopia's Awash River Valley, and, like Kabwe, usually assigned to the taxon Homo heidelbergensis. MorphoSource didn't have a scan of this particular skull, but I really like this fossil, and wanted to see how my current methods would compare to my attempt from several years ago. To that end, I heavily modified the Amud 1 cranium to match Bodo's dimensions and details, and built up the portrait from there. I'll finally say more on that qualifier to the species name now, since this fossil has a bit to do with that. Fossils like Bodo and Kabwe have had a couple species names, the first being Rhodesiensis after the British settler colony occupying Zambia when Kabwe was found, and 5 decades later they were folded into Heidelbergensis, which they're still typically assigned to. Recently, some have proposed assigning them to Homo bodoensis, a newly erected taxon named for this ninth cranium and placed as the direct ancestor of our species. I'm a little fond of this new name, but there's still a lot of contention about it, which I'll have more time to elaborate on when this one's fully textured and I create the dedicated video for it. In the coming year or two, I'll be making videos for all of these reconstructions individually, like I did for the OH5 reconstruction this past January. I've been reconstructing hominins for a while now, but I'm by no means a professional. So if anyone has an expert opinion on these, your advice would not be unsolicited. Consider this the solicitation. I hope you all enjoyed this showcase of my works in progress, and that you'll check back in for each of the finished reconstructions as I share them in due time. Thanks for watching.